Hey there, glad everybody's back. And this is Mark again, and we're doing our second one of the day. Is the third one, but we have a Paul Fisarelli here who's going to talk about the GreaseWeasel for disk imaging and floppies in general. This is kind of a continuation of a talk he did in 2019 at Tandy Assembly and stuff that he did a couple months ago here on the Coco Tech on this channel. Anyway, so I'm going to turn this over to Paul, and we're all going to have a good time. Oh, also have Rick Euland and Brian Weisler, that lucky guy with the deluxe Coco with the ROMs. And Paul, let's make you big here.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again, Mark. So as Mark mentioned, this is TR-80 floppy disk imaging with the GreaseWeasel. And as Mark had also mentioned, this is kind of a continuation of my talk presentation that I had given at Tandy Assembly back in 2019, one of the Tech Talk seminars. So just as a kind of an introduction, going to talk about the history of disk imaging and also give you a preview of a utility that I've been working on called Coco Flux. So a little bit about me, for those that don't know me, my name is Paul Fisarelli. I grew up in upstate New York. I'm presently living in Seacoast, New Hampshire area, just a little bit north of Boston. I'm a have long time history with TR-80 line of color computers, mostly the color computer, which I got as a Christmas gift back in 1982. But I also have a lot of history with the original Z80 based models. And some of what I'm going to talk about today is relevant to not only the Coco, but the Z80 based models as well. I worked at Radio Shack during the mid 80s for a short stint, sold quite a few TR-80 and Tandy computers. For those that have worked Radio Shack back in the day, you're familiar with the kind of commissions you would make selling TR-80 computers. And I was quite good at it. So my background is in computer and systems and electrical engineering, but my current line of work, I'm focused on cybersecurity research. As far as what I do today in the retro community, I have a tendency to kind of be all over the place with regard to my 8-bit hobbies. Do a bit of game development, utilities and applications, and design work for supporting game development or just software in general on the TRS-80 computers. I get into hardware and PCB design work. I do quite a bit of 3D printing, and I'm also big into archiving, preservation, and restoration, and why flux imaging is important to me. And I think, it's important to the community as well. So why am I giving this talk today? What is this material all about? Who's it for? What is my goal behind this presentation today? And as I mentioned, gave the Tech Talk some attendee assembly back in 2019. This being somewhat of a follow-up to that. I'm going to give you a brief history on disk imaging in general and preservation and archiving. And then I'm also hoping to be able to deliver content that is of interest to anyone in the community or 8-bit hobby with a desire to archive their floppies, or if they're not doing it right now, have an interest in getting into it. So one of the things I wanted to stress too is if you do have floppies, these things are disintegrating with age, and they're not going to last forever. In some cases, they may outlast us. I mean, we're getting to be that elder generation now. But I hope you really take the time to look through your floppies. There's quite a bit out there that people are finding every day that hasn't been archived. And if you do have an interest in this, please, touch base with folks in the community who do it. And it'd be great to get others involved as well. So real quick, I'm going to do a bit of history on disk imaging and flux imaging in general as well. So I've got kind of a live show and tell. So the first one I'm going to cover is the GreaseWeazle, which kind of introduced folks um, to the ability to do disk imaging and archiving in the first place. So this is the GreaseWeazle MK4, and it's the last in the line of GreaseWeazles that was produced. The GreaseWeazle was created by the Software Preservation Society, and excuse me, the GreaseWeazle was produced by um, individual computers. It was originally built as an ISA card for Amigas back in the day, the 2000, 3000, 4000 series. And it was really designed to be used as an ISA card to be able to interface unmodified PC drives with the Amiga line of computers. Um, and as I mentioned, this one here is the MK4, or MK4 Plus, which is a PCI based card that was available in the mid 2000s. These are no longer available. I think, they're still widely sought after and used in a lot of cases. Um, and what this is actually doing is it adds a little bit more than the floppy controller here, the 34-pin floppy controller. But it also has PS2 built into it for doing PS2 mouse and keyboard. It also has a couple slots here for SID chips. And what this card was really designed to do was to augment emulators, the Amiga emulators back in the day, in a modern, well, I say modern, but mid 2000 style PC that could support the emulators that had a PCI bus. Those guys that were looking to really emulate the SID audio, have floppy access, and PS2 mouse support and keyboard support and that sort of thing. The other thing that's interesting about these, this is kind of the start for the Z80 line of computers, notably folks in the community, Tim Mann and Quentin Barnes, had written drivers for the GreaseWeazle and utilities to be able to archive those disks, interface those disks, and be able to convert to DMK formats. Next up, we have the CryoFlux. And the CryoFlux is originally created by the Software Preservation Society. I got that mixed up with the GreaseWeazle initially, but this was created back in the 2009-2010 timeframe, again by the Software Preservation Society. The Software Preservation Society was originally known as the Classic Amiga Preservation Society. Once again, kind of ties to the GreaseWeazle, where the Amiga crowd and those folks were looking to take the next step to be able to preserve floppy disks. So it was originally introduced with the ability to connect legacy floppy drives to a modern computer through USB interface, and I believe it was the first board able to do that. And again, when I gave my talk back in 2019 at Tandy Assembly, part of it was focused around the CryoFlux and showing how you could use the CryoFlux to create flux images of those floppy disks. So one of the notable successes that I've had with this board was at that Tandy Assembly back in 2019. I had met Arno Puder, who had come up to me after my presentation and asked if I might be able to help him recover some floppy disks that he was unable to read previously. And with the CryoFlux, we were able to actually read those disks. They were FM encoded disks, and they basically contained source code to a game that he created as a teenager on the Video Genie, which is the TRS-80 Model 1 clone. And he hadn't seen that source code since being a teenager in the mid 80s. So he was extremely thrilled that we were able to do that. One of the downsides to the CryoFlux, though, is that it's a proprietary format. They have their own proprietary stream format. Their software allows for conversion to numerous other formats, but because of the closed nature of the stream data format, it was difficult, and I haven't really revisited it but it was difficult to be able to create conversion utilities for any of the unsupported formats. Coco, Color Computer being one of them. There was utilities for doing DMK, but they were somewhat spotty. DSK images, I remember writing my own, and it worked somewhat reliably, but it left a bit to be desired. So that's the CryoFlux. Next up, we have the SuperCard Pro, which I don't have. I tried looking for it and I can't seem to find it. I think I might have lent it out to somebody and I never got it back, but I did have one at one point, and I wish I had one to show you live here. But the SuperCard Pro was created by Jim Drew over at CBM Stuff, and this card was the reason is the reason why the SCP flux image format exists today. Again, SCP being the SCP from SuperCard Pro. So that format and this card were created by Jim Drew. I had the opportunity to meet Jim over at VCF Midwest this past fall, and had some great conversation time with him. He's absolutely brilliant guy, and he what he did with this card and what he does for the Commodore community is amazing. So glad I had the opportunity to meet him. So I got to ask him about this card a little bit, and in particular the SCP format, because I support it with my utility, and it's what the GreaseWeazle uses today. So Jim explained to me that he originally created this card and the SCP format because he was a user of the CryoFlux before this, before he created this card. And any time he had reached out to the Software Preservation Society to talk about their technology, to talk about, possibly creating some custom formats and, leveraging that hardware for his specific needs, they were always a bit reluctant to share any information. They kept it very tight to the chest. So Jim decided to take matters into his own hand and created this card and created the new format. And because it's all open source, it's a tremendous benefit to the community. So thanks, Jim and CBM Stuff for that. One thing I will mention, the SuperCard Pro is no longer available. They ran out, a few years back, but Jim is working on a advanced model of the SuperCard Pro. So looking forward to seeing that come out at some time in the near future. And we'll go back to live presentation. Next up is the applesauce floppy disk controller. And this is the applesauce here, the latest version of the applesauce. So the applesauce floppy disk controller was originally created by John K. Morris, and he introduced this at, or the concept behind it, back at Kansas Fest in 2017. So he originally created this with the preservation of Apple floppy disks in mind, namely, to support the GCR encoding on Apple floppy disks. One of the things that is required with this specific unit to use it with Apple floppy disks, because Apple doesn't use the index hole as modern PC drives and Coco drives do. You have to actually make hardware modifications to an Apple disk drive where you have to install an optical encoder, an optical sensor that senses the index pulse as it's going by. However, John has made some tremendous successes in the release of newer versions of this being the latest. And what he now does is, if we take a look at the back, in addition to the standard Apple II floppy disk controller here, there's also the 15-pin Apple controller as well. But he's also introduced the 34-pin standard PC drive interface, the IDE interface. And it's opened up a whole new world of the ability to image other disks besides Apple. So
that's a 19-pin connector.
19-pin, you're right. Sorry, Mark.
Right. It's for the later disc twos. Yeah, I know. I have a bunch of them.
That's correct. So
one other thing this requires a Macintosh for the back end, unlike the others. I think I'll work on.
Yeah, it does require Macintosh on the back end. It's in some cases maybe a limiting factor for folks, but it doesn't really require a whole lot of horsepower. So if you have the ability to get your hands on an older Mac, they're kind of all over the place. It's definitely worth having one on hand for this specific device. Um, and even though I, have several different options to do imaging, I have used this and most recently used it with uh, I met at so let me back up a minute. So when I was at um, VCF Midwest, not only did I meet Jim Drew there, but I also met AJ from Forgotten Machines. And AJ is huge into preservation of floppies and anything 8-bit or retro machine related. He's kind of all over the place with regards to being able to preserve quite a bit in the retro community. So AJ and I spent a late night during VCF Midwest. What had happened was somebody had come across a bunch of old 8-inch floppies in the free pile, and some of the floppies were in rough shape. They were warped, bent. They were just not. They looked like they had been spent numerous summers in 150-degree storage heat, high humidity. So they were in pretty bad shape. So AJ and I spent a good portion of that night. And actually, Adrian from Adrian's Digital Business came over. It was the three of us having drinks and trying to restore 8-inch floppies. We didn't have much luck at the fest. And what ended up happening was he split up the discs among a few folks. We took them home and started looking at them a little bit more in depth. Ultimately, what we ended up doing was working with John over at Applesauce and using the Applesauce imager to be able to restore restore and also decode the format of the discs. And what they ended up being were 8-inch hard sector floppies. I think they were 77 sectors per track. It was some crazy format. And what ended up happening was John had worked on a custom firmware for us to be able to figure out the encoding on these to get because there was no index pulse when we were doing the reads. We were able to get all the tracks realigned, and we ended up finding out that the discs belonged to a proprietary. Um, they were trying to remember the manufacturer of it. But what ended up happening, they were for a blood pressure machine that actually used 8-inch floppies for storing data. So they had some interesting data on there. But again, Applesauce used just recently for doing that restoration, and the support that we got from John being able to do it was amazing. So great little device. And if you do have the ability to have an Apple or get an Apple, they're definitely worth looking into to add to your imaging devices. Okay, next up, we've got the GreaseWeazle, kind of the star of the show. So the GreaseWeazle was created by Keir Fraser back in 2019. And Keir, for folks that don't know him, is he was one of the creators of the open source Zen project, Type 1 hypervisor for Linux, which has now since been taken over by the Linux Foundation. So absolutely brilliant developer. And we have Keir to thank for the GreaseWeazle. So the GreaseWeazle was, as many people in the community have noted, it's kind of got a funny name, but it's in part, it was taken to pay homage to the cat weasel, one of the original, disc imaging devices. So Keir decided, that adding the grease portion to it, while no significant meaning, just sounded kind of cool. So that's where the GreaseWeazle came from. But when I inquired Keir about the origins of the name, I joked around that he should, attribute it to the fact that the device is so slick. So we'll see what he does with that. He got a chuckle out of that one. So the GreaseWeazle is something that I come across in November 2019, shortly after Kira introduced it. And it was shortly after I returned from Tandy Assembly and fresh off my presentation at the time. It appealed to me greatly because very similar to the CryoFlux, but the big difference being that it was open source in nature, and it directly supported the open source SCP format from Jim Drew. And then the other thing too, I was going to mention here, knowing David Ladd's love of all things floppy, I introduced the GreaseWeasel to David shortly after that, not knowing how much community would suffer as a result. So I apologize for that. And I know David loves these, and I do too. He's just more enthusiastic about it than I am. Um, so again, this is the first generation of GreaseWeasel, and there's really nothing more to this than a PC board that's got the IDE header on it. It's got a power port on it for it can handle low voltage or a low current draw for 3.5-inch floppies off the USB port. But it's an STM32 microcontroller based. It's a blue pill, and I know David and Mikey Furman had covered this during their Coco Tech Talk presentation or Coco Tech Talk presentation. So luckily, I got a few of these where they were not the fakes. I think they're still circulating to some degree out there. But this one, again, I built this back in 2019, and I just still hold on to it. And it's a great little device. I've had much success imaging many different floppies with this. So in addition to the original, couple other models that I've got here. This is the F7 Plus version, and this just added a little bit better support for things as you could connect multiple floppies to it. There was read and write, read-only jumpers. So if you're doing any type of forensics work, anything along that line, external power supply. So if you needed additional voltage, it was a really nice version of it. And then this is just a little custom 3D case that I designed that it goes into. The latest one, though, is this one here, which is the 4.1 version, which I've currently got connected. And with this added, it added a couple neat features, but the big one for me is the USB support. A lot of things are going USB-C, and getting away from the USB micro or the larger USB Type B connectors is kind of nice. I have USB-C cables kicking around all the time. So this is the latest version. They are available through numerous different vendors. If you go on eBay, you can find numerous different shops that sell them, that make them. And Cure, I think, just announced through the Facebook group that they've either built or sold their 10,000th model of this particular version of it. So pretty impressive, and it's pretty popular these days. And I think they go for right now they're about $40-50 shipped. I got this one. I think this came over from Ireland or the UK someplace. But yeah, it's not too bad. So this would be the one that you would get your hands on if you're looking to get into GreaseWeasel disk imaging. So next up, I've got a live demo of Coco Flux, which is a utility that I've been working on. I had started this this utility shortly after getting my hands on the first GreaseWeasel, and it was in preparation of the 2020 Tandy Assembly. I was asked to give a talk at that time, and as we all know, COVID hit, and Tandy Assembly or Coco Fest, I'm sorry, was postponed as a result of it. So what ended up happening was I backburnered my presentation in favor of other shiny things at the time, and just recently brought it back out and started playing around with it and trying to get it into at least alpha release. But I'm going to demonstrate some of the features of it today. It's not available at this moment, but hopefully I'll be able to get it into some alpha tester hands soon. Any questions up until this point?
You said that was version 4.1 of the.
That's correct, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any questions from the people watching the stream. And so I think we're all good so far. Nice history, though. I didn't realize there was so much to it.
Yeah. And again, Mark, that's what I had lined up for the Coco Tech. So I figured it'd probably be a good opportunity to talk about it here.
Exactly. And that'll get me brownie points with the Jim Brain because I got another talk for the Virtual Fest. Yay.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. So on to Coco Flux here. So Coco Flux is a utility that again was born out of trying to figure out a way to take flux images, again the SCP format that GreaseWeazle that the GreaseWeazle creates, and being able to convert them to Coco friendly formats. And there's software out there that will do that to some degree, namely HXC, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. That's gained quite a bit of momentum. HXC makes floppy emulators. They make there's hardware kits available as well, but they have a great HXC utility that allows you to explore floppy disks and be able to manipulate them to some degree and do export into formats for various systems. However, I noticed that when I tried to use it for doing Coco formats, it was lacking in some key areas, and I think it may have improved a bit since then. Again, we're talking 2019 timeframe, so we're almost 5 years ago, 4+ years ago. And one of the things that I noticed is the DSK format, I think, was primarily for the TI-99 4A, DMK formats for the Z80 line of computers. But while I had limited success with it, I noticed occasionally it would truncate the disk images. It would just crop off what it wasn't able to fit, and there was no real easy way to be able to manipulate it. And then the other format that I was keen on being able to convert to was SDF, which is the native format for the Coco SDC. So it's very analogous to the DMK format, but it's the SDF format is directly supported by the Coco SDC. And what's nice about the DMK format and the SDC format, for folks that may not be aware, is it does a preservation of all the metadata, all the disk structure, to be able to support copyrighted disks. So any not copyrighted disks, copy protected disks. So any disks that implement any sort of copy protection, you need all that additional structure to the disk image, or else it's not going to work. That's why if you have an SDC and you try to use a DSK image that is of a game that has copy protection or use copy protection, unless that's cracked, you're not going to be able to use it. So we're going to demonstrate a little bit of that here. So getting to the utility, what I've recently started to implement, and it's not quite finished yet, and actually it's based on the older command line structure of the GreaseWeazle, is the ability to have a GUI-based front end to be able to do the imaging directly with the utility rather than having to go from command line and then import and then export. So this is what that currently looks like, where you have the ability to do things like set the delays on the GreaseWeazle directly, and this is important in some cases where you're having trouble with some tricky disks. Otherwise, you can typically just leave them standard, but it gives you the ability to modify those. You can read disk images, and then you can also write disk images as well. For the purposes of the demo today, because again, this is using the older structure of the command line, I'm going to be using the command line directly. But once we've created those disk images, we're going to import those into Coco Flux, and I'll show you what you can do with the Coco Flux. In addition to the disk imaging, this is the disk details page, which is showing you a bit of information as far as how the bit cell structure, which is the flux imaging data of the floppy disk, what that looks like. It's really nice for showing you a visual of what the tracks actually look like, the sectors actually look like, and if you've gotten a clean image of the disk once you've captured it with the GreaseWeazel utility. And then the other thing that I've implemented is the disk analytics, which is still a work in progress as well. This is very, very similar. And when I say very similar, I basically stole it from HXC as far as showing what the actual structure of the disk looks like physically on the disk itself. However, I modified it a little bit where HXC shows you the track map information for disks that it's actually been able to decode. What I actually did is I also include the ability to take a look at the flux transitions so you can see where you might have some problem spots on the disk itself. So we'll take a look at that as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is pull up shrink this down just so you can see what I'm doing, but also have the ability to look at the utility. All right, so I've got the floppy disk here, and I've got the GreaseWeazel side by side. And it's just basically, we've got the USB connection here, which goes to the USB port on the computer, the floppy disk, which is just plugged in with the 34-pin connector here. And the first disk that we're going to take a look at is just kind of a plain vanilla. This is an original Rainbow on disk, and it's the February 1988 version. So I'm going to slide this out. Pop this into the drive. Everything connected. Pull this up for now. So I'm just at the command line interface where I have GreaseWeazel software set up. So GreaseWeazel, you can either use it, they have precompiled binaries available, or if you want to take source, you can build it yourself, or if you want to use the raw Python, there's numerous different ways that you can interface with it. So just to make sure I'm connected okay, I'm going to type GW info, and that tells me I have a communication to GreaseWeazel 4.1. It's on COM16, tells you a little bit about the MCU version, serial number, all that sort of thing, what kind of USB support it has. So I'm going to do there we go. So I just did the GreaseWeazel RPM command, and it's just basically telling us that it's a 300 RPM disk. And that was just a way for me to communicate with the drive itself, just to make sure that it's able to read and that the indexing, everything is okay. So the next part that I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to attempt to read the disk itself and convert it to SCP flux image. And to do that, we do GreaseWeazel command. We have to identify which tracks we want to copy. And we do that with identifying what cylinders we want to go for. This is it's a 35 track disk. I'm going to do 0 through 39, which will capture 40 tracks. So the diskette itself is probably 35 track, but I'm going to capture 40 just in case. You identify what head you're using, the head being which side of the disk. You can do 0 to 1. You can do 0 as just side 0, or you can do 1. So it's single-sided, so we're going to do 1, and then, or 0, I'm sorry. And then we're going to do step equals 1. So we're just going to step one track at a time. To do that, I noticed I made a mistake here. So 0 to 39. And I need to give it an output name. So I'm going to do rainbow.scp. I think that's right. No, it's not. What did I do wrong?
Hey, Paul,
Yes.
could you make your window bigger? For some reason, the zoom at my end is kind of pixelating your feed, and so that's like hardly readable. The bright areas are fine, but the dark black background on the characters is
So the text?
Yeah, the text is not very readable.
Okay.
Resize the window or the font size.
I just bumped up the font size. Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit. I almost read it a little bit. I can see latest, something to latest, drive delay. Yeah, it's really pixelating for some reason. I don't know if I'm not decoding the zoom really well or what. So it's a little bit better.
I'm missing something here. Here, one sec. Oh, I know exactly. I got to tell it that I'm reading a disk. I don't think I need the COM16 since it automatically detects it. Okay, so now as you can see, what it's doing is it's doing a raw flux read of the tracks that I just specified. So the T0.0 is indicating track number dot head 0. And it's telling us how many flux transitions it's actually picking up per track, and also the time that it's taking for that particular read. Okay, so I'll minimize this, and what I'll do is I'll maximize this, if that's any better. Can you read that okay, Mark?
Yeah, the white looks a lot better. The black's a little bit better. Hey, that floppy disk image is changing with your program. That was a live camera on the floppy, right?
Yes. Yep, so I just turned it off, so.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, so from here, what I can do is grab that rainbow.scp that we just created. We'll do an import of that, and it parsed it. So it looks like just on the initial view here, it read all the tracks successfully, except for this last one here, track being 40. And most likely what happened with this, again, it's a 35 track disc, and it's just garbage at the end there. So if I go ahead and click on the individual tracks here, we can see that the data over in our data window here is changing, as well as our graph down below. And what the graph down below is showing is the number of bit cell, the number of bit cells over a period of time. And then also on the y-axis, we have the time in microseconds per flux transition. And as you can see, it looks nice and grouped, and there's layers to it. And each one of these layers is basically the number of microseconds per flux transition. And just at a quick glance, we can tell that this is an MFM encoded disk. And the reason why is because we have groupings at 4 microseconds, 6 microseconds, and 8 microseconds. So those are the standard transition periods for an MFM encoded disk. If it was an FM encoded disk, we would only see those at the 4 and the 6. So come in and excuse me, on the right-hand side, what we have is kind of a hex dump of what the actual sector data looks like. And we can take a look at it in full track view. We can take a look at it in sector view, but then we can also parse out individual tracks and sectors, which gives us a cleaner look. And if you can read that, you can see that we've actually got ASCII2 encoded text. So that's telling us that we've got a pretty good read with this one here. The other thing that I did with the GreaseWeazle capture, which was on by default, is the number of revolutions. So what you can actually do is set how many times you want to capture an individual track, and the default format is 3. So we can take a look at all 3 individual revolutions here. And what's nice about that is it gives us a comparison. So there's what I'm hoping to do with this software is being able to pick out trouble areas and being able to use that data, those individual revolutions, to reconcile any errors or any inconsistencies. So again, we'll go to the parse track or the parse sector view. If I go to track 17, which as many folks know is the directory track, what I should be able to do is step through, and we should ultimately see a directory structure pop out. And it's logical track for sector 2 here. And as you can see, we actually see a directory structure here. There's control.bas, control.bas again, castle.bas, shopping.bas. So it looks like we've got a pretty good read here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do, well, first of all, we'll take a look at disk analytics. So this is showing us what the actual flux transitions look like. So we can see, it's pretty much green all over the place, which is indicating that we've got a good read. If we click on track map, we can see all of a sudden all that structure pops out, and we can see that the individual tracks and individual sectors in there as well. So we'll go back to disk details, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to export this disk image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export it as a DSK, 35 track disk, side 0, and it's double density. What I need to be able to do that is create a file name here. So we'll do rainbow disk. Hit the export button, minimize this, and then what I'll do is I'll bring up my floppy disk utility for taking a look at floppy disk images, and I'll drag. Tell me, it doesn't like the structure of it for some reason. Hang on one sec. Actually, what time is it? It's 1:15. What I'm going to do, Mark, is I'm going to skip to the next disk here, just to save time, because I know we've got a hard stop at 4:30, right, Mark?
Yep, I should have the next person ready to come on board here.
Okay, so the one that I really wanted to show was this one here, which is a Gantlet 2 original disc from Dicom Products. And as many folks know, Dicom used copy protection on their discs. So what I'm going to show is how we do a capture of this using the GreaseWeazle.
Hey, Paul, if you want to go longer, my next slot, they had to bail. So I have a whole
Okay.
hour. Go.
All right,
Go as
fair
long
enough.
as you want.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully we don't go that long. I don't want to be that long-winded. But we'll do the Dicom, and if we have time, we'll go back to the other discs that I have here. So bring up the GreaseWeazle utility again, and this time what we're going to do is just change the name of it. And I think that's how he spelt it, something like that. Oh, there's a E in there. All right, so we'll do a capture of that. Again, we'll capture all 40. We can see the disk, again, the head tracking there as it's reading track by track. And we can see that it's getting zeros on those last tracks, which means that there's no flux transitions there, which means that, again, it's only 35 track disk. All right, so we'll go ahead and minimize that. And we'll bring up the Coco Flux utility again. And we'll grab the Gantlet disk. And what you might be able to see here is these disk images, the size of them, even though it's only 35 track disk, they're quite huge, 9.3 meg in particular. And the reason for that is because, again, it's doing that flux level copy, which is just capturing every single flux transition on the disk. 3 revolutions of it worth. But what's significant knowing about this is once you've done a flux level copy of a disk through the SCP format or other type of flux image format, you should never have to try to read that disk again. All the relevant data that you would ever need from that floppy, if you've gotten a good read, is permanently archived in that SCP file. So it's important to note that because a lot of times with these older discs where they're starting to delaminate or they've got mold or they're dirt or whatever on the discs, you might only have one shot and one shot only at reading that disc, and it forever will be unreadable beyond that point. So getting that flux level image copy, extremely important. And again, why it's a great idea to, invest a few bucks into a GreaseWeasel type imaging device to be able to permanently archive these floppies. All right, so we'll go ahead and open that. We can see that it's parsing. Taking a quick look at the disk view, we can see that, again, these last 5 sectors or tracks on the disk contain 0 data. They were unreadable, so that's why they're red. But if we go to track 17, hopefully we see some directory structure there. We have what looks like a fat table there, and I just start stepping through. Yep, sure enough, what we've got is logical sector 3, which is where the directory starts. We're seeing the Gantlet data there. So if I go to disk analytics, this is an interesting view, and what's great about this is it shows you exactly the copy protection implemented by Dave Dyes and Dycom Products at the time. These first, the way that the track structure works is it's from the outside working in. So these first 10 or 12 tracks or whatever they are all huge. And that the reason why is because those are 1024 byte sectors. And that was part of the copy protection that Dycom introduced. Once you hit track 17, however, that's where the directory structure resides. And from there, it looks like a regular structured Coco floppy disk. If we go and look at the flux transitions, again, you can see where those actual flux transitions happen. Most of it's green, which indicates it's a pretty good read. What I can do down here in the window is I can actually take a look at the actual individual transitions, flux transitions. We can zoom in here. And what I'm actually going to do is change this to a flux timing plot, which shows you basically the up and down of the transitions. And zoom in here. And what you can actually see are these transitions as it goes from 4 microseconds up to 8 microseconds, back down to 6 microseconds. And what this actually is an IDAM marker for folks that are familiar with the structure of a floppy disk. But this is what's actually telling us that we're at the start of a sector, or we're at the start of a track. So we're using this to sync sync the disk and being able to read and do the MFM encoding from this point. So it's just kind of neat having the ability to take a look at that. You can also look at the histogram view, which is nice because what that's showing us, what I can do is increase marker size so it's a little bit darker. You can see with the histogram that the bulk of your flux transitions are in the 4 microsecond range, then down to 6 and down to 8. So again, telling us we've got a good read. I'm not going to see anything on these tracks because they were completely unreadable. But as you look at the different disk tracks, you can see where there's actually good data and where there's probably some problem spots on it. So again, we're going to try the export here. We don't want the rainbow. What we want is Gantlet.
So just a note, your green background is, everything green is reacting with your background. So we see a cityscape when you're seeing green areas.
Oh, is it because of the, oh, hang on one second.
So yeah, like when you show the disc and how much of the disc is green, what we see
I
is
know,
a cityscape. It's pretty funny.
it's because my green screen is still turned on.
Yeah, it's funny.
I apologize for that,
Oh, no
guys.
worries. It's just some of the figures look kind of strange, and I suddenly realized what it was.
I gotcha. I didn't even think of that when I did the green screen setting. So let's how's that look?
It's the city.
It's still the city, huh?
We've just got pure background now. The program went away. All we have is the city.
Oh, I gotcha. Maybe a bit late in the presentation to
Yeah. We need GreaseWeazels. Make it come back. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to derail everything.
No, I wish I had known about that before. I probably should have practiced a little bit more on this, but
There it is.
okay. Yeah, I see that now. That just stinks. All right. Actually, one way that I could do this. Is that any better?
That's beautiful.
Okay. So, glad we got that straightened out. Sorry to delay here. All right. So what we're going to do here is do the export.
What'd you change? What'd you change?
So I just basically went from the OBS virtual cam to a straight share of the screen.
Ah, okay. Gotcha. Excellent.
So we're going to do is export as a DMK. DMK being supported by the emulators, double density, 35 tracks, and we're going to do just straight up side 0. And what we want to do is save it as Gantlet. I'm going to replace it because I don't. Oh wait, that's a previous one. Yeah, that's great.
I figured it was my end, so I'm glad to know it was up at your end.
Why it's still a alpha release here, so I had a hard crash on it. We'll try one more time.
Hey, if people don't like it, they can have their money back. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's I don't sell any software. It's all free when it is available. I just have to finish it. All right. So you guys can see that okay now, right?
Oh, it's beautiful.
All right, great.
4E, 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 4E.
Oh yeah, look at all that. So again, we'll try the export. And it's not cooperating. Something is not happy.
Try a different file name, try a different folder.
Yeah.
Why not?
Last time you saved it as a DSK.
Yeah, the DSK, we don't want to use that, Brian, because all the DSK is a concatenated file of disk sectors. And what we want to do is we want to preserve all the metadata, or else the copy protection will fail.
I follow.
You could temporarily save it as a DSK because your error
Yeah,
might be in the handler for the DMK.
Yeah. What I'm going to do is try here. Something is not working. All right. So in the effort at saving time, what I'm going to do is do a previous test version of one that I created.
There you go. One I've prepared earlier.
That's right.
Switch to the backup screen. Oh no, it green screened.
Can you? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's Microsoft presentations.
Can you guys see that screen? Okay, though.
Yes.
Perfect. So all I'm doing is just browsing for the disk image. And for some reason, VCC doesn't.
It's underneath. Yeah.
An open file. Just not cooperating with me today. Oh, it's because I tried to open it as the SCP image. I wanted the DMK. And there it is. All right, so we've got a directory, which is good. And if we try to load it, and if all works well, then we should go into the game. So that's a successfully exported DMK that I had tested earlier. So we can tell that the copy protection and all that had come over with the imaging of the disk. So all is good with that particular file. I don't have any controllers hooked up, so I'm not going to be able to play. And I don't have the board disk copied. So anyways, that's just demonstrating how you can do a flux level image copy and export it to a DMK. I don't have my live Coco 3 set up, or else I'd show how we could do an export to SDF. So the last one I was going to show you real quick, if we have a few minutes left.
Yes, we do.
We in good shape? Okay. So if you can still see my, actually, I'm not sharing that.
You can see your light cycle.
All right, hang on one sec. I'll switch back to. Switch back to the other view. Okay,
Still there?
so yeah, I'm still here. Sorry. I was just trying to stop the share, and I'm just going to
Okay.
switch over to the other view.
Gotcha.
All right, so back to seeing. Oh, I see what it's doing. So
Yeah, the lights right through the letters. We got light
Yep.
cycle.
all right, so we have to go back to the other view.
Change the light
Apologies,
cycle.
guys. How's that?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Perfect. All right, so I've got a floppy here that I did an image of for a gentleman a little while back. And what's significant about this particular floppy is that it had some bad spots on it. So I'm going to show you real quick what it looks like if you get a floppy where you have trouble spots and you are trying to archive it. We'll just do test disk here. And again, we're getting low flux counts towards the end of the read, which is indicating that there's no data out there. So we'll go ahead and minimize that. Flux utility, and what we'll do is we'll grab that image, just drag it in. And as you can see, the patterns, we're getting a lot of intermittent flux transitions outside of the range. If we do a histogram on this, you can see that those peaks are more widely spread now around the 6 microsecond marker, around the 4 microsecond marker. And the intensity of the green is telling us, you know, how bad those may be. If we go to the disk analytics, you can see all of a sudden that with the flux transitions, that there are a lot of trouble spots on that disk. We go to the track map, it'll give us a little bit, well, that's really bad. So that's skewed all over the place. But it was able to read some track data. But if I go to, if I parse out the sector information here, what you can see is that there's actually ASCII2 data there. If I go to the directory track itself, we can see that there's actually directory information there. Some of it is missing. However, through the use of this utility and just some manipulation of the tracks and the data itself, shifting where the actual IDAM markers were and being able to stagger the reads, the track reads, I was able to recover roughly 98% of this disk. And we, you know, the gentleman that I did the retrieval for was extremely happy with it. But it gives you an idea, you know, showing you, you know, not all floppy reads are successful, and you know,
Nor
it's
100%.
no. So what I'm hoping to be able to do with this utility is make it more automatic instead of the manual process that I went through of retrieving data. It's still a bit away. And as you can see with intermittent crashes, just trying to do an export, definitely not ready for prime time yet. So still playing around with it, but hope to have it in the hands of a few testers. I know a few people in the community have reached out to me already to start, kicking the tires on it and being able to play with it. So that's pretty much all I have. Any questions or any follow-ups on anything?
Comments from the gallery, but nothing really, no direct questions.
Okay.
One question I had was, so a person is out on eBay looking to buy one of these, and maybe it's just labeling by the seller, but they'll say like 4.1 floppy adapter, flux reader, writer, Amiga PC, Atari. Is that just their naming? Is it all the same thing, or is there something specific a person should look for?
The key thing that you want to look for, Brian, is GreaseWeazle version 4.1. I think
Yep.
everything else is just hot words, or they're trying to hit the search engine. So
Yep. Okay.
they're if you're on Facebook, and I hate directing people towards Facebook, but the GreaseWeazle community is extremely active. Kira does quite a bit posting on there. The other one that's really good, I believe that there's a Facebook group as well, or not Facebook, Discord channel as well for it. But those two avenues should be able to get you in the right direction for being able to find what you need.
Very good. Is there anything specific like that 5 1/4 inch drive? Is that just one that's in good shape, or is there any special drive that you try to find?
So yes, so this one here is I think it's a Mitsumi. It's Tech Drive, FB 501, and I think this might actually be one that I pulled directly out of an FT 502 enclosure. Because I knew it would be compatible with the Coco floppies.
Would hope so.
What you can do, I mean, it'll support 80 track drives, double-sided drives, where you could run into potential issues with doing Coco related copies. If you're trying to read a Coco floppy and an 80 track drive, what you want to do is make sure that you have your settings correct as far as how you read those tracks. And what you're going to end up doing is you're actually going to skip every other track. And the way that you do that with a 80 track drive, we'll back up here. So my command line, where it says where I'm doing my stepping, what you would actually do is step that to 2, so that you're basically skipping over every track. And what you would do is you basically change 39 to 79. So that'll read the entire length of the disc, but it'll skip every other track. And you're going to keep head 0. And this is documented on the GitHub page. Actually, that's another place to go to, is the GitHub page for the GreaseWeazle. There's a wiki in the GitHub page that tells you about all the different versions. You can find people that are making them. They'll often reference and point you in the right direction on who's got the latest and greatest. But more importantly, like I said, it'll give you the documentation you need specifically for the command line ability to read the discs.
Thank you.
For the most part, I mean, it's great if you have a 35 or 40 track floppy to be able to read if you're doing primarily Coco. You can get an 80 track to work, but you're going to have one thing that I will stress, though, is if you're going to write discs, you definitely do not want to write 40 track discs with an 80 track drive. It's going to be completely unreliable. So it's best to have a 40 track drive to be able to do that. The what is it? The TIAC 55B, I think, is probably a good one to find, but they're getting kind of rare, and they're also quite expensive if and when you do find them. But if you have any older FD501, FD502s, more than capable of working with the GreaseWeazel. The only thing you might need is the adapter to, or the cable, the correct cable to go from a card edge to a 35 pin connector, unless you have a cable like this, which gives you the option to do both. I think
Any further
Mikey and David Lag covered that quite a bit in the Tech Talk, Coco Tech, the
Coco Tech.
episode that they did. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was trying not to have too much overlap from what they did. And again, this was going to be my part of the presentation for that.
No problem. It's all getting hosted at the same place now. So we'll stitch them all
That's
together.
right.
Well, if we don't have any further comments from the audience, I think we'll call it a wrap.
So what, meet back in 45 minutes?
Probably so. Rick, did Thomas get a hold of you about maybe switching slots?
No, but I can if he wants me to.
I haven't heard back from him, but maybe we should plan on that. Go live in 45 minutes or so. And
I'll go through the Discord and everything and see what he wants to do. I'm going to be there both times either way. So
I know. So I figured you'd be flexible. So
exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for doing this. And of course, thank you for thank you for continuation on this. I mean, this is you stretched this out over 5 years, I guess, now in 2019 and then late last year and then this year. So
yeah, like I said, again, it was supposed to be for Coco Fest 2020, and COVID threw a wrench into that, but I've been busy doing other projects. This was just kind of maybe an excuse to kick off the dust on it. And obviously it's still dusty in some areas, but we'll get it cleaned up and hopefully out there at some point.
well, hopefully also drive some interest too. So that's one of the advantages of these presentations is like, I know you're not going to make it to Coco Fest this year, so at least you've done a presentation. So we can check that off. You've done your part
That's
for
right.
2024.
Right.
Sounds
I'll
good.
probably be having you on other Coco Techs also, as well as Rick and maybe even Brian with his new deluxe Coco or something else too. So anyway, well, I'm going to call this a wrap. So about 45 minutes. And yeah, Grant says you need to go to Coco Fest.
Yeah, I wish I could this year, guys. I'm sad that I'm going to miss it, but
Well, we're just going to keep doing it. So
Real life comes up. So we'll try to help out however we can.
Hopefully next year.
Hopefully next year. Pencil it in. Okay, well, I'm going to call it quits. So we're done for now. And about 45 minutes, we'll be picking this up again. So thank you much, guys. And
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
See you all later.
thanks.